hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in today to talk about Oshi no Ko, chapter number 153. This chapter is titled Fiction. And I'm going to be honest with you, every time I read a number like 150 something, it just seems so weird and so different. Like, I don't know, speaking it after I've done all of these chapter reviews, it just feels weird to not say, like, hey, a chapter number 140 blank, or like 146, or like 134, or like 123. Like, it seems like there's a good cadence to those numbers. But, like, saying like 153, it just seems different to me for some reason. I don't know if that's just because I know these chapters are nearing the end of Oshi no Ko. As of course we know, this is the first chapter of the final arc of Oshi no Ko, Towards the Stars and Dreams, which, just great titling right there, but it just feels weird to read that. But like I said, this chapter is indeed titled Fiction, as of course last chapter was all about how this movie seems to be a little bit of a fiction and over-dramatization of the events that actually happened. And yeah, there's not really too much to say before we hop into the chapter. I guess let's just go through the events of last chapter, which is, of course, where we saw that the initial screening for the 15-Year Lie movie happened. It is going on in mid-November, or around that sort of November-ish time. I don't think we actually got a date. There are some interesting character interactions, of course, between Gotonda and Kaburagi. And the very end of the chapter, it was revealed that the interviewer who was interviewing a few of these characters throughout the entire series, as seen in Volume 1 of the manga, was actually none other than Hikaru Kamiki. And we got the conclusion to the sort of little speech that Aqua gave at the beginning of Chapter 9 of the manga. Last chapter, Aqua's like, hey, my acting is all to get revenge on you, Hikaru Kamiki. As we learned that Hikaru and Aqua are actually talking to each other, father and son. They definitely do not have that father and son relationship going on right now. But that is exactly where we ended off with Aqua saying, like, hey, I will act to get my revenge out of you, right? And that is where we start up this chapter pretty much. And yeah, we just start off with a shot of Aqua's, of course, light Sharingan. It is currently not the dark Sharingan, so besides for Aqua's stupid haircut here, I like this Aqua more, because this Aqua is not evil Aqua, and I like the 2.5D stage play arc, talking with Taiki. I really like that moment, but either ways, we hop into the chapter. We see that Aqua has stood up out of his chair for some reason to look at Hikaru on the same eye level, I guess, as Aqua just says, like, hey, the managing director of Media Eyes Incorporated, and the real father of Taiki Himekawa, Ruby, and myself, Hikaru Kamiki. I'm standing here now to get my revenge on you. As we pretty much see that Aqua says this and is staring into Hikaru's eyes. As we get a close-up of Hikaru's face with the dark Sharingans on full display. And Hikaru's just like, yeah, you know everything, don't you? As he's just like, it seems like you've researched me pretty thoroughly. I'll be completely honest with you. As an audience member, I have to say, I enjoyed this movie very much. And he's like, the information was all accurate, and the actors definitely put on a very spine-chilling performance. And I know that you were involved in the script writing too, and it was a really great story. But this movie was fiction after all, as we see that he picks up the camera off the tripod and looks more into the film of the digital camera currently doing it. As Hikaru just says, like, it was fabricated, exaggerated, and everything inconvenient was completely concealed. Such an ordinary fiction is a piece of entertainment that could be found anywhere. As we see that he is holding the camcorder straight up to his eyes as he's looking into the digital screen to see what's actually going on in front of him, to getting a close-up of Aqua's face. And Aqua says, why do you think so? As Hikaru eventually takes the camera off from his eye and closes it up and sets it on the table in front of him. And Hikaru says, take Ai's kiss scene, for example. In this movie, I and myself were portrayed as having an awkward love relationship appropriate for our age, as if we understood each other in our own way. But in reality, it was really different. I was just relying on her one-sidedly. As Hikaru just continues saying that the real I wasn't that affectionate, and the real me was craving more love. She just didn't know how to take care of herself, so she couldn't reject me. She never loved me once. I miserably clung to the woman who dumped me, and foolishly killed her out of spite. And that's all. And Hikaru, after saying this, suddenly sort of just shifts his tone of voice again, and he just says like, hey, in real life, we were a lot more realistic. We were neither exciting nor dramatic, just a common story that appears in the news once in a while. As we get another close-up on Aqua's eyes directly looking at Hikaru here, as Hikaru just continues saying like, hey, anyway, this movie's going to get me killed socially. And he's like, congratulations, kid. Your wish has been fulfilled here. You've done what you wanted to do. I'm screwed from now on, and that's just how it is, you know? And eventually, Aqua just speaks up after Hikaru says this. And he says, so you confess your sins and just let society judge you? And Hikaru's like, well, do I have any other options? And he's like, this was her wish, wasn't it? If revenge against me was what she wanted, then I'll accept it. I loved her from the bottom of my heart, after all, so I would understand. And Hikaru's like, hey, I am glad I could finally talk to you. I mean, you must be annoyed because, if I could speak, Hikaru continues just saying, like, hey, you must be annoyed because a crazy murderer who killed your mother is forcing his, like, fatherly, feelings on you and all of this, but it is honestly, really, how I feel. I loved her, so whatever she wants, I'll gladly take it. As Hikaru eventually picks up his camcorder and starts to walk out of the room, as Aqua says, like, wait, do you really not understand what I wished for me with this DVD? As we see that he's got the 15-year-old Aqua D&D in front of him here, and he's holding it up, and eventually, Aqua just says, do you really not know the 15 years of lies that I had been telling you? This movie is not fiction. And as Aqua makes this declaration, we go into a flashback. As this flashback deals with Hikaru and Hikaru's thoughts during the real timeline. This is not movie stuff, this is what actually happened. As we pretty much open up the scene on the funeral for, of course, Taiki Himekawa's parents, who were, of course, Airi Himekawa and Seijuro Urahara. As we see that the funeral for both of them is happening at the same time, we see a bunch of men in business suits standing around paying their respects, and we see Hikaru's here holding flowers for the two of them. As we see that as Hikaru is standing here looking at the two of them, we see that Kendachi-san, of course, who is Toshiro Kendachi, we see that he comes up and puts a hand on Hikaru's shoulder. So for those of you who don't quite remember who this is, he is not only big up in the Lai production troupe, he is also the adoptive father of Taiki. Simple as that. So he knew the family and he also knew Taiki. But either way, what Toshiro says here is like, hey Hikaru, I know this must have hit you the hardest. He's like, I know they both cared about you so incredibly much. And he's like, but either way, that's why you have to shoulder the burden of their lives and keep on living in their memory from now on. And we see that Hikaru hears and he's just crying a little bit. As eventually, of course, Toshiro does not know about everything that went on behind the scenes here and how not a good person Airi actually was. And honestly, how much of a saint Seijuro was, because Seijuro, granted, he killed her, but still, he was a respectable man, unlike how Airi was a diabolical human, right? Not somebody who should ever be allowed to be near children. Let's just put it that way. And Toshiro saying this sort of flicks a switch in Hikaru's mind, as Hikaru sort of like almost has a vision of Taiki standing in front of the grave of these two, or in front of the funeral hall, the pictures and all of that, as Hikaru's just like, shoulder to burden means like, do I really have to? As we see that he's got a little bit of a breakground, as Toshiro is sort of like, oh, okay. And we eventually get a bunch of narration pretty much for the rest of the chapter from Hikaru pretty much going like, it's painful, the weight of life is crushing my heart. As we see that he's sort of just thinking all these things directed towards Ai. As we see a panel where he runs up and hugs Ai, just like, help me, Ai, you're the only person who understands me. Every day I was burned by their lustful gazes. They kept hitting on me even though they only cared about my looks. The words I love you seemed like nothing but a big lie. It felt like the only way for me to get someone's love was to offer up my body. Because until then, they'd be happy if I did that. As we see signs of Airi here, of course, who did very bad things to Hikaru. We're not going to get into it, just terrible and awful things. And eventually Hikaru just like continues and he's like, we were the same, we understood each other, Ai accepted me and loved me. As we see a sign, obviously, where Hikaru and Ai did some stuff together in a bedroom, both naked, and we see that they both do these two things, and that's presumably where Aqua and Ruby were born. That's like, if the timeline works out and all of that, that's what happened. As eventually, we just see some other signs of Hikaru being very happy with Ai, the two of them out sort of walking around town sort of on a semi-date, as Hikaru just is like, hey, I was the only one for me, and I was the only one for her. If we continue to support each other and live on, I'll be able to bear this burden. Or at least, that is what was supposed to happen. As we see that Hikaru, in some time in this flashback, we see that he's just freaking out. He's like, huh? What is that supposed to mean? As we see Ai, who is currently, has her toothbrush out and her toothpaste, getting ready to brush her teeth, presumably at night or in the morning at some point. She just says like, well, I was thinking maybe it would be better if we don't see each other anymore. And we see Hikaru's despondent face, as at that point Hikaru just says, there, I heard the sound of my world collapsing. And that is where we end off chapter number 153 of Oshi no Ko here, and I cannot lie. This was an amazing chapter of Oshi no Ko. The banter between Aqua and Hikaru in the beginning of the chapter was magnificent. It was really good. It was just great. I just really don't have anything to say about it. The two of them talking, Hikaru giving his fatherly love in a way to, who's his face, Aqua, was really nice, and presumably there's something else. If I had to guess, what is written on the disc is something about how Ai, of course, had feelings for Hikaru and wants him to be happy even though she was not there to make him happy and to see that through. I imagine the series will end up with Hikaru being like a broken and despondent man over what he's done to not only Ai but to his own children. Very interesting and all of that, yada yada. I have to say, I love Hikaru's dialogue, as every time, just the way he talks, it's in such an interesting way of like, hey, anyway, this movie will get me killed socially, or just saying like, hey, this movie was fiction, like, I was really one side. Like, we obviously can see that Hikaru has had a lot of time to process all of these deep and dark emotions, and the way he just speaks them is really good and really interesting. Just, such a great chapter and such a great tone throughout. And of course, the ending of the chapter, where we see the breakdown of Hikaru after being told to live for Airi and Seijuro's sake. Of course, when we know the atrocities that Airi had done upon him. Just really, really interesting. And then the scene where we can guess that's where a conception of the two children came from, Ruby and Aqua. Very interesting. And that's presumably why Who's Her Face said that, hey, it's probably better if we don't see each other anymore, was because of that, or something more. We'll probably learn about that a bit more in the next chapter. But either way, great chapter. Hikaru looked awesome in this chapter, like, not awesome as a person, but awesome in, like, the scenes he was in, just really, really cool. And, I really just don't have too much else to say about this chapter. I just really enjoyed it, and it was a nice sort of flow through to sort of get more into that depth of who Hikaru is, which is really the main crux left in the series at this point, is who is he, what good is Aqua doing here, what were Ai's wishes, and all of that sort of deal. So, very nice and good to indeed see. But yeah, with that, thank you guys so very much for watching this Oshi no Ko chapter number 153 titled Fiction Review. If you did enjoy it, maybe you would consider like going out and checking some of the other Oshi no Ko chapter reviews I've done. I've done a number of them. I can't tell you that exact number at this point, but I've done a few of these. And I don't think they're all as good as this chapter, of course, since I've done like 40 of them, but there's some good chapters, so if you like them, go check out those, and if you didn't, well, don't let me know. I don't want to feel all that down today, but yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching, and yeah, I will see you guys next time, and yeah, this will be Glowplasma 231 out. I'll see you next time for chapter number 153. Signing out.